Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on ClueCon Weekly. So last week here in the States, we celebrated Thanksgiving, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you, our community, for supporting us and for supporting the Free Switch open source project. And speaking of open source, up next in about 1 minute, Dan Jenkins and Fred Posner are going to be joining us to sit down and talk all about open source, so stay tuned for that. But first, a quick reminder that ClueCon 2020 already is scheduled for August 3rd through the 6th. So that's the first week of August, like it usually is. And we've got a few promotions scheduled to come up for those of you who want to register early. So keep an eye out for that. You can check our social media. I'll be announcing it right here, and that can help you save some money, and we can get you some extra raffle tickets. Also, IT Expo is coming up this February, and we are going to be having live Free Switch training there. That is Wednesday the 12th. February the 12th, that's a Wednesday, 2020. And then the next day, Anthony Minasali is going to be giving a talk, so that's February 13th. And David Duffett is going to be joining us there as well. And speaking of David Duffett, let's go find out what he's doing right now.
Hello there, and welcome to another ClueCon Weekly. I'm very pleased to be here with both Dan Jenkins in the UK and Fred Posner over there in Florida. And this is only my second ever ClueCon Weekly as host. I've been blessed to be a guest a few different times, like you guys have already. And the reason why we find ourselves gathered here today is that both of you did a ClueCon Weekly ahead of Astricon that came out around the time of Astricon. And we thought it'd be a good idea to get together and talk about that and what happened at Astricon and how your feelings might be and might have changed since then. Who'd like to jump in and talk about that?
I'm a huge fan of jumping, so I would love to do so. Let's see. We had Astricon at the end of October, and as we stated in the last ClueCon Weekly with Madison, who is always lovely to talk to, that we had some concerns regarding the direction of the Asterisk project under the tutelage of Sanjoma. And that's my attempt at trying to use a big word, and that will be it for the rest of the podcast. So there were some concerns, and there were, to say it bluntly, strong concerns that perhaps Asterisk was no longer in the best hands. And with Astricon, it was definitely different. It was a much smaller crowd than before. There was no expo. There was kind of an internal expo, I guess. There was maybe 3 or 4 displays, I guess, in the hallway as you would approach.
I think we also point out that collection of displays was, Sangoma centric, wasn't it? It wasn't a kind of an open expo. It was restricted to partners.
Yeah, and I think one of them was even Sangoma Joma. It was definitely different, where you would have 4 or 5 rooms in the past. There were 2 open source rooms and 1 business centric room. The positive on that aspect, though, was that the rooms were very crowded. Because there was, over 100 people trying to fit into just 2 rooms. You had a good audience, and that was great. So that was a fantastic aspect of the conference. The content seemed to be pretty good. With the exception of the 3 of us, I thought that the content was exceptional. With us, it was just mediocre at best. On the the food was phenomenal, but that really doesn't help you with open source. But we did get to voice our
concerns about SAUCE, because there were sources at the buffet.
There was we did talk directly with people at at Sanjoma and express our concerns directly. There was Jared Smith was given a different position where he is, in charge of a VP in charge of open source, and one of his job description points is to be the ambassador to the top level execs there, on behalf of the open source community. So I think that change happened directly because of concerns from the community. So that's a fantastic step that happened just before AstraCon started, and the fact that generally there was interest in what we had to say, as well as taking the time to meet with open source people. We all went out to dinner with Bill, which was great. The three of us and five or six others from the community, and in the 20 plus years that the two of you have been doing AstraCon, I don't think Danny ever took you guys out to dinner. So that's it was a good step forward.
I put my hand up and say I did get taken out to dinner on a number of occasions, but then I was kind of staff, right?
Yeah. Never me.
I think both of us went into AstraCon at least with a view of we'd agreed to do it. We're men of our word. We'd said that we were going to go and do our talks, so we were going to go and do our talks, and we weren't really expecting anything.
Yeah, just to inject something for a minute, Dan. The reason why we're talking like this is it was really down to a blog post ahead of AstraCon, wasn't it? That's why people's hearts were a little bit heavier coming into AstraCon. It wasn't, well, maybe it was, a fear of the unknown in terms of AstraCon possibly being a bit different. But the reason why you spoke out was effectively a blog post ahead of AstraCon.
Yeah, I'd say it was a mixture of the two, right? We all knew that AstraCon was going to be very different anyway. That had been made clear months ahead of time when only one open source track was going to be there. A lot of good quality talks that we knew about had been turned away because there wasn't enough space. For those reasons, plus the blog post that essentially described to anyone just reading it with no pretense behind them, you'd read it as open source will fail you at some point. Use one of our products. Buy one.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the blog itself was enough to trigger.
I mean,
it was the water temperature was rising, and the blog post certainly brought it up to a boiling.
Yeah, I guess there was a number of things, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, as we've said to a number of people, there was little thing after little thing after little thing. AstraCon was one of those little things, right? Where we weren't entirely sure what it was going to be like, but it wasn't a big enough thing to kind of throw everything out the pram and go, no, this isn't right. The blog post is what finally made a group of us start talking in public about all of this stuff.
And apparently I just felt like talking right over Dan without caring that you finished.
We've all had that feeling at some stage, Fred.
I was going to say, the concerns that I had and Dan had expressed about the blog post and about what it means, I think our concerns were validated in the AstraCon content. When you look at the Target presentation, where the blog post of being it's time to outgrow, or can you outgrow open source? And here's one of the largest retailers in the world saying the time has come to use open source and replace proprietary systems. And they talked in detail, Target, about how they're deploying Asterisk and Kama Ilio in their entire retail space, and how well it has performed, and the amazing return they've received from the use of open source telephony. And I thought that was a great validation of our concerns over the nature of this article were done. But I was really happy with the response from Sanjoma into listening to what we had to say, and I think I'm definitely not pessimistic. I'm looking forward to see what comes forward, and to hopefully the words were taken, and I do hope that it will move forward well. And I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, and the same goes with both projects. The sad thing is, because even with FreeSwitch, right? FreeSwitch did a great thing in going to GitHub. I thought it did a phenomenal thing. I'm still waiting for Stir and Shaken to be seen in GitHub. Not seen it.
Last time I asked Tony about that, that there are still plans to release stuff as a library, I believe. However, it's not happened yet, but I believe the timeline is weeks rather than months.
Phenomenal. So that's awesome. And so things like that are great, but hey, FreeSwitch is still Signal Wire, as we're all talking, and Icons, I'm sure, show. And so they're still a private company in charge of the project. So we're still at that kind of will. There was a lot of sentiment towards Wire in the recent news, where because of their transfer to a U.S. company, there's concerns over people using that just by just a simple change of ownership. So I'm hopeful that Asterisk is in great hands. I know when you talk to the developers and you talk to the people involved in the project at the project level, like Matt and any of the free PBX developers as well, they're still just like they were. Their goal is to put out the best type of product they can.
Yeah, I think one of the things we certainly saw at Astricon was at a very high level, the boss man, Bill Wignall, did put his hands up and say, mistakes have been made. We're trying to learn from them. We're trying to move forward. And as you said, there were warm words and warm actions at Astricon in terms of consulting with people and things like that. And it is excellent news to see Jared in that new post. We all know and love Jared. He's a known to be good guy with lots of community history, not just in Asterisk, but in Linux projects generally as well. It's been now over a month since Astricon. Do you think we've seen anything just yet? Any fruit of those intentions?
So we have not seen something, and that's certain blog posts by a certain individual, or at least
there has been one or two blog posts.
So there probably have been a couple of blog posts, but I haven't read any that really made me want to shout about them. So that's a good thing, right? Blog posts are fine, right? We all need content. We all need to drive our businesses. It's having content in the right form, addressing the right things. So yeah, I haven't read anything that made me really want to shout about it and complain at people about it. So that's good.
That's positive.
Has there been much other positive stuff? Not really, but at the same time, it's been 5 weeks. So
yeah, and actually, to be fair, we were towards the end of a conference season. But as things warm up for the next year, thinking of Camat Ilio World and other things, Open Source World in Fort Lauderdale, stroke IT Expo. What personally I would like to see, I'd like to see Jared out there a bit more, representing the sort of community face of the project, because as Fred was saying, it's not only a case of Jared out there representing Sangoma's stewardship of Asterisk. It's actually a case of Jared feeding back from the community into the Sangoma management, and the way you do that is by getting out there and sort of meeting people face to face and picking up the vibes and that sort of stuff.
I've not seen anything negative or positive since Astricon. Again, we've had Halloween, Thanksgiving in the US side, pretty much a dead
so you wouldn't necessarily
and now we're
a huge amount of activity.
Right, and now we're approaching the Festivus season, so who knows what's going to happen. I agree with you about the Open Source Summit, especially since last year and all years before it was Asterisk World, right? So it would be a huge difference to have, I don't know if I don't know if they're going to even do a booth or something, whereas in years past they've had a significant presence there, where they were, if not the largest, one of the largest presences in the expo hall, let alone having dedicated tracks. So
if there was sponsor in previous years, I think.
Yeah, so it would be great to have at least someone there from the project, still saying, hey, we're out here and exist and everything. I know that I believe Signal, I know you're going to be there, David, and Signal Wire.
I believe we got a day of free switch training going on there. And there will be other things going on. But yeah, I have actually reached out to Jared, and the jury is out whether he'll actually be able to attend. But I was suggesting something along the lines of a reprise, or as we would say in England, a reprise of a fastest dude to the dial tone stone type contest down there. Maybe something around PJ6. But anyway, we'll see what happens.
I know we won't have Mr. Jenkins there this year. I'll be there.
No, it's a long way to go.
In the past, the conference has been more on the meh side, so I mean, I can agree with that type of travel thought. So
not too far away from you, though, Fred.
No, and good people. It's there's not a ton of open source conferences like this in America, so I try to hit wherever I can, and especially with it being in the state of Florida, I would definitely.
Absolutely, Fred. You've just kind of led us on to another good subject area to talk about, and that is the people, because I know a lot of us who go to these conferences don't just view it as an industry opportunity or even a business generation opportunity, but a lot of the time it's catching up with our friends and colleagues in the industry. And I think that's another great thing about Astricon. Astricon, there was a goodly amount of people who we've known and worked with and interacted with for some years. And I think the whole community aspect, and that's putting aside an Asterisk or a Free Switch or a Homer or a Ast Linux or whatever it is, just the people is an amazing part of the industry that we work in.
I agree. And, on this year was positive to see so many of the people that we love. It was significant in the people that did not come. And that was, definitely something that can't be ignored. So the big test will be if we get to see them next year, I think, and go from there. But yeah, there's a lot of, open source community is all about the people. And yes, there's a product or several that align us and align our interests, but it's the people that definitely make the community what it is.
Yeah, I know before now, Fred, you've often talked about how you see and feel these people as family.
Absolutely. The example I give is when I hear more from the open source community when there's bad weather in Florida than my own family. I have more people checking on me to make sure everything's okay. I have received just the outpouring of, I mean, it's going to sound sappy, but the outpouring of love and just support that I've gotten from anything from my daughter's birth to birthdays to job changes or this community is there to have a beer with you when you have great news to share, as well as to have a beer with you when you need some quiet time just to be sad, but not be sad alone. So it's a community that is just absolutely there in the good times and the bad times, and it's exactly what family should be.
Indeed. And Dan, how have you found it in your 27 years in this community?
People should know that I run an event called ClueCon in the UK, and anyone that knows about it will know my opinion on community. Not that the talks aren't good and useful. I think it's some of the best content at an RTC event, personally. But I mean, I'm biased. But anyone that knows the concept of the conference knows that it's all driven around community. It's all driven around interaction with other people that are there, and the talks are kind of just secondary. So I mean, that speaks for itself. We all know that the community within open source is hugely important. And I mean, not that it's getting easier to kind of promote open source, but when names like Twitter are at JanusCon saying, yeah, we use Janus, and Target are at AstraCon saying we use Asterisk and we use Kamaedio, these are like hugely vital for the community as a whole. But it's also vital for us that make a living from within the community, that the recognition is there, that open source is important and does have a good ecosystem around it, and everything else that we take for granted. It's only when you go and kind of start talking to businesses or people from outside of this ecosystem, that are very much used to buying in something from Cisco or whoever, and you start talking about what these projects, not products, they're projects, what these projects can do. It's then that companies start going, oh, I didn't realize that, but can I rely on it? And it's the community that ends up backing that up with, of course you can. Like there's this huge community behind all of these projects, and without those communities, the projects are amazing still, but would anyone have any real sense of belief that they can actually invest and put them as core parts of their business? Because
I think
whatever any of these companies say, one last point, whatever these companies say, they always tell me, oh, telephony isn't a core part of our business. Something else is this hugely important thing. But telephony is hugely important. It's the pipe that drives all of that traffic, that media through, whether or not it's WebRTC online, whether or not it's WebRTC in an app, whether or not it's old telephony lines coming into a building or via SIP. It's still hugely important. They don't see it as important because it isn't their key part of their business, but it is a key part for getting their customer base into their business.
I think that's the thing, that there's that old adage about people like people and they buy from people. Well, in this world of communications, we're the ones that help the people connect with people. And you're not going to sell anything until people have connected with people. And I think the family feel of what we do comes from the fact that instead of this being like a fully commercial thing where there's a load of people kind of on the receiving end of a Cisco or a whatever, we that get involved in the community here are as much about giving as getting. Yeah, of course, we need to get things and we need to make progress, but there's a lot of giving that goes on, and the relationships that form are not purely on corporate channels. As the three of us know, and I'm sure lots of people know who'll be watching, there's all sorts of communications pathways between all of us, from matrix groups and Slack channels, all the way through to all sorts of stuff that don't need your own server and key encryptions verified at every stage and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I was leaving space there for one of you to talk.
I was just excited that you mentioned Matrix. Open source VoIP isn't just VoIP anymore, right? Especially with WebRTC, it's kind of more of an open source RTC, as Dan likes to put it. And yes, it's a community that is global. There's not many people that I know of that are close to each other locally. To the point where they see each other outside of RTC events. And yet this is a community that's pretty well connected and shares information and prides itself on not, the antithesis of, probably not the right word. We're the opposite of what the proprietary communication platforms do, where when something new and shiny comes in, we'll test it out. And if it's a way of, slicing bread better, we'll do it. It's absolutely something that we look to always constantly improve and see, hey, is there another method of us improving the way that we can communicate or make it easier for people to communicate? I think Dan has a great example of that he just did with the cyber megaphone Dana aspect of, here was something that the Asterisk developers had made to communicate, and Dan made it better. So just little things we're always trying to improve and to make communication possible. And it's fantastic.
That's a giving thing. In fact, Dan, do you want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about Dana?
Yeah. Is it Dana? Is it Dana? It's Dana.
Well, I'm an English guy, so I'm going to go from Dana.
But she's from Ghostbusters, and she's Dana.
Oh.
She's the gatekeeper in Ghostbusters. Anyway, I think Asterisk 15 came out with their SFU capabilities. Or was it 14? I think it's 15. Anyway, a couple of years ago now. And part of the Asterisk team at the time, the Digium team at the time, wrote something called Cyber Megaphone 2000. And it had like flaming text, and it was built to show how to use Asterisk's SFU. Did its job very, very well, but at the end of the day, it's one JavaScript file and it's one HTML file. And so following along and trying to figure out how it all works is, I find, quite difficult. I'm a web developer, if no one knows. I say that an awful lot. So if it's difficult for me to look at it and go, this is how it all works, then it's probably difficult for someone else. So I've been saying since the very beginning that it's not the best. And the Asterisk team have been replying with, well, someone should do something about that. And my past 2 years have been taken up with my new son. And I've been busy running a business. And we were talking about it again at AstraCon this year. And Matt Fredrickson, in the last session of AstraCon, said someone should fix that. So I decided I'd finally go away and fix the one JavaScript file and the one HTML file.
You rose to the challenge, Dan.
Yeah, so the original plan was to replace Cyber Megaphone and potentially replace the repo, replace the contents of the repo with something new. But in the end, I decided against that because then I would have to get like pull requests and things like that into an asterisk org repo. So there's a lot of paperwork with that. And B, that one JavaScript file and that one HTML file can be useful to certain people. So I decided to start a new project called Dana, the Stream Gatekeeper, TSG. And it's just an example project. It's open source under the MIT license. It's under the Nimble Ape GitHub organization. Maybe David can put some links into the YouTube description.
You may think that one, but I'm sure we can arrange that.
Someone will do it. And it's just an example. It's an example project for how to write a modern day web application with React and asterisks SFU. And then it's going to be expanded. It's all released under the MIT license. So there's not that these are properly released yet, but there's a ARI bridge. At the moment, all my demos use ConfBridge in the dial plan, but that limits you on what you're actually going to do. So if you wanted to do, say, transcription on each individual participant, you can't do that with ConfBridge because you can't spy on every single individual participant, apparently, or so I'm told, within ConfBridge. So I ended up having to make an ARI application so I could spy on each participant individually. And then using this new thing in Asterisk 16.6 called external media, you can send your media, there's two-way media, off to a server that understands UDP. Doesn't need to understand like the whole RTP stack, doesn't need to understand everything, it's just UDP. And then in the future, it's going to get expanded, hopefully, to be like WebSockets and useful things that are less complex to do. Anyway, so there's three different projects. There's Dana, the Stream Gatekeeper, which is just a GUI in front of Asterisk. And then there's these two new projects, the ARI bridge, and then there's this audio server that takes the audio, sends it up to Google. Google then transcribes it, and then we send it back down to the browser, and you get inline transcriptions as you're talking. And you'll even be able to set what your language is. So if we're talking in English, but someone was in the conference and they spoke Spanish, then the transcription would appear in Spanish for them. So it's just it's an open source project that isn't really meant to be huge. It's just meant to show people how to utilize all of these technologies together and actually build something pretty awesome in very, very few lines of code in the grand scheme of things.
Great. Okay. Well, as you said, we'll try and get some details in the description so people can click along. Now, we're in the closing month of the year, but the New Year's round the corner, and there'll be conferences coming up, first of which is Open Source World / IT Expo in mid-February. But, of course, Kama Ilio World is not that far away. Do you happen to have dates for that, Fred, at all in the new year?
Yeah, it's April. Is it April 27th? Let's see. There are dates for it, and we now have a call for speakers.
Yeah,
just came out.
April, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the last week of April. It is April 27th through the 29th in Berlin, Germany. It's at the same institute that we've had it for the last few years. And again, there's a registration that will open up very shortly, but if you check on Twitter, there's a call for presentations that just came out. I think what makes Kamailio one of my favorite conferences all year is the quality of the presentations. And we're not a type of conference that only wants to hear from people we've heard from before. In fact, we love to hear from new people, and it's those new presentations that make everything just so fantastic. So we love to hear how you're using Kamailio or how you're doing anything in real-time communication that can possibly improve the way that people communicate.
Great news. Great. There's also, of course, OpenSIP Summit in Amsterdam. I think that's a week or two afterwards, early May. ClueCon in August. I think it's got the 6th of August in it, and always in Chicago. I think it's changing venue. I don't think it's at the Swiss Hotel this year. I think it's going to be elsewhere, but I'm sure you can find details on the internet. And of course, AstraCon. We don't know where that's going to be yet, but the chances are it'll be October time. That's usually when it comes around. So lots of exciting conferences to look forward to. Gents, our time is coming to an end. Any concluding comments you would like to make before we clear down? Don't both speak at once.
I don't think so. I mean, just the general. At least I feel as though there are a group of us that need to keep the companies that hold these open source projects. We need to keep them to account. And so that's Sangoma when it comes to FreePBX and an asterisk. That's SignalWire when it comes to FreeSwitch. And even though there might be a lot of, what am I trying to say? Even though there might be a lot of heartfelt, we didn't mean to make these mistakes. And I believe that there were at least mistakes made both on Sangoma's side and SignalWire's side recently. There are only so many mistakes that can be forgiven. And I think it's very, very important for us as the community to hold the rights holders to account and say, no, we're not going to accept this anymore. And we came very, very close to that with Asterisk. And I don't believe we've got that close with SignalWire. And SignalWire have made good progress on like moving to GitHub, which I know has increased the amount of issues that are being made and contributions that are being made. So that's really great. But we do need to remember that we could fork these projects at any time. And even though it might not be fun to do, it's open source at the end of the day. And so
in the case of FreeSwitch, moving it onto Git has made that even more possible, hasn't it?
Right. So yeah, I think things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, part of being in a family means that we're not there to just blow sunshine
right
in the direction of each other. So I'd much rather hear criticism from my family than from the outside world. And I'd much rather my family help me with what's best to bring in other perspectives as to why this may not be perceived well in the outside. Especially with, any of the three of us, for example, here right now has spent a good amount of our lives both benefiting and promoting from these open source products. But the promotion also, in my mind, means that, hey, when we are seeing something that maybe isn't being done in the best light, that we bring it to the attention of the people that can make those decisions.
Mm.
You know,
As a follow on from that, what we need to see is actions, not words. Talk is cheap,
Right. Exactly.
and really we've got to judge people and organisations by what actually happens or doesn't happen.
Or doesn't happen. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, you can go and read both mine and Fred's thoughts after Astracon. Both of our blog posts are up on our respective blogs, where we both left optimistic for the future, and that's because of talk. There's only so much time that follows where talk becomes cheap, and isn't seen as productive. So yeah, I hope Sangoma improve things going forwards. I hope SignalWire carry on in their path of progress. And I yeah, Camit is in this weird position where it's not like neither OpenSIPs or Camit are controlled by a big entity such as SignalWire and Sangoma, and that's probably partially why we don't talk about it as much. I mean, nothing bad's happening within Camit and nothing bad's happening within OpenSIPs, but we kind of hold these big companies to more of an account, I guess. Because
it's whether they're benevolent sponsors of the projects or good parents rather than being terrible step parents, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to say that ever that Camilio is.
But we know
clearly the reason why there's an Open SIPs and a Camilio is because there was something in the past, right? Exactly. So, and definitely don't want to see something like that happen to projects. I wasn't associated with Camilio back then. I was a pure OpenSARE guy. And so when you see a project fork, it's never good for the community. It creates a lot of uncertainty, which is never good for business. And, it's difficult for developers and relationships within the community as well.
What's the question that you got asked after your talk at Astracon? So why would I choose to use Camit over OpenSIPs? And that's kind of number one question that always gets asked, right? So forking isn't something to be had lightly, but the communities will do it if they feel as though they need to, right? So yep. I hope that we don't get to a point where any project within open source RTC gets forked in the near future, because we are a smallish community and we don't need to be split even further.
Well, it does sound like, in conclusion, that we have reasons for optimism and we're hopeful for 2020 absolutely. In the world of RTC.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, gents, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for giving of your time. It's much appreciated, and I'm sure that in the future we'll be talking to you again at some stage. But for now, thanks a lot and goodbye.